Dead America. Tales from New York. The Call by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Day 0. 1:32 a.m. Freeport, New York. Just to the east of New York City on Long Island. Cora stood in front of her open refrigerator, bathed in its cool light, contemplating her beverage options. Rows of drinks greeted her, a spectrum from beer to alcoholic seltzer water. What to pick, what to pick? She mused aloud, her gaze flitting across the array of drinks before her. Her mind was sluggish, dulled by the 5 drinks she had already consumed. But Cora, a seasoned veteran of the New York service industry at 26, was accustomed to such indulgences. Her liver, hardened by years of late nights and partying, was more than capable of handling the alcohol. "Ah, this one has strawberry in it. Sold," she declared triumphantly, plucking a can of strawberry-infused seltzer water from the fridge. With a deft motion, she cracked open the can and took a long swig before making her way back to the television. Despite the late hour, Cora was wide awake, her senses heightened by the buzz of alcohol and the excitement of another episode of her favorite trashy reality show. As the familiar intro played, depicting 2 wealthy women locked in a heated argument, Cora couldn't help but shout encouragement at the screen. "Yeah, Victoria, smack that bitch down. She was totally hitting on your man." She cheered, her words slurred with intoxication. Mid-cheer, her phone began to ring, jolting her out of her drunken reverie. It took her a moment to locate the device amidst the clutter of her living room, but when she finally did, she saw that it was a video call from her sister Jenny. Excitement bubbled up within her as she answered, still shouting over the blaring television. "What up, Jenny? Girl, you need to hurry up and get off work. You're missing a hell of a beatdown on the show." But instead of the expected lively response, there was only silence, punctuated by the sound of muffled crying. Confusion creased Cora's brow as she glanced down at the phone, her heart sinking at the sight of her sister's tear-streaked face. "Girl, what's wrong? Did Brad break up with you again? I swear to God I'm going to kick his." She began, her words trailing off as Jenny's trembling voice cut through the air. "Cora, you have to get out now." "Get out? Girl, I'm so drunk I can barely." Jenny's voice, more forceful now, sliced through the air, cutting off Cora's thoughts. "You have to get out now." Cora's gaze locked onto the screen, her heart racing as she registered the terror etched on her sister's face. Her eyes widened in alarm as she noticed the crimson stains on Jenny's shirt. "Jenny, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern. Jenny shook her head, her expression a mixture of fear and confusion. Before she could respond, a cacophony of noise erupted off camera. "The door is broken," a voice shouted, panic evident in its tone. "Oh my God. Oh my God." Jenny's voice trembled with fear. "Jenny, what's wrong?" Cora pressed, her own anxiety mounting with each passing second. It took Jenny a moment to compose herself, her eyes locking onto the camera with urgency. "You need to get to Mom and Dad's right now," she urged. "It's almost 2 in the morning," Cora protested weakly, but Jenny's next outburst caught her off guard. "You need to go now." Jenny's voice, usually mild-mannered, was filled with desperation. "The 3 of you need to get on the boat and get away from people." Cora shook her head, struggling to comprehend Jenny's urgent directive. "Get on the boat? What are you talking about, Jenny?" Another crash reverberated through the phone, accompanied by anguished cries. "Something's wrong with people, Cora. They're going crazy, killing people," Jenny explained, her voice breaking with emotion. "Jenny, what the hell are you talking about? Is this a prank?" Cora's disbelief mingled with rising dread. But Jenny's response was a plea, raw and urgent. "Just please, Cora, do this for me. Get to Mom and Dad's and get on the boat." "You're going to meet me there, right?" Cora replied, her voice quivering with uncertainty. Jenny's cries pierced through the phone, mingling with the escalating chaos on her end. The sounds of screaming, not of terror, but of agony, reverberated through the line. "Oh my God. "Oh my God," Jenny repeated, her voice choked with tears. "Jenny, are you okay?" Cora pleaded. But Jenny could only sob in response, her tears flowing freely as she stared into the camera. "I love you, Cora," she managed to say before the phone was jolted violently, the image shaking as something collided with Jenny. "Jenny. Jenny." Cora's voice cracked with fear, her eyes glued to the screen as the phone tumbled to the ground, landing a few feet away from Jenny. The camera angle shifted slightly, now facing towards the door. Cora watched in horror, praying that this was all a twisted prank. But as the scene unfolded before her eyes, she knew it was far from a joke. Two grotesque figures loomed over Jenny, tearing into her flesh with savage hunger. "Jenny." Cora's scream echoed through the room, drawing the attention of one of the creatures. It turned towards the phone, rushing over to it, before dropping a chunk of her flesh onto the device, and then darting away in search of its next victim. Cora recoiled in horror, dropping the phone as she was consumed by hysterical sobs. Minutes passed as she struggled to regain her composure, her hands trembling as she reached for the device. After several moments, she turned it over, only to find that the call had disconnected. "Jenny, what the hell?" Cora fought to steady her racing heart, forcing herself to take deep breaths in an attempt to regain control. Once she felt a semblance of composure return, she swiftly scrolled through her contacts, locating her mom's number. As the phone began to ring, she muttered to herself, "Come on, Mom, I know it's late, but you need to pick up." After several rings, the call was diverted to voicemail. Undeterred, Cora dialed her dad's number, only to be met with the same result. "Damn it," she cursed under her breath, frustration mounting. Cora turned her attention to the television, flipping through the channels in search of a local news broadcast. But her efforts were in vain as the screen displayed only reruns. Realizing she needed to take action, Cora pushed herself off the couch, steadying herself against a wave of dizziness brought on by the alcohol. With unsteady steps, she hurried over to the window of their third-floor apartment, peering down onto the deserted street below. Although their neighborhood was usually quiet at this hour, Cora's gaze fell upon a few shadowy figures wandering aimlessly down the street. Squinting through the haze of her inebriation, she tried to discern if their movements were erratic, but her vision was blurred and uncooperative. "Do I go to Mom and Dad's?" she muttered to herself, torn between fear and uncertainty. After a few moments of internal debate, Cora nodded resolutely. "You're going to go, Cora," she affirmed aloud. "If Jenny is pulling a prank, then there's a good chance Mom and Dad are going to cut her out of the will, especially since Dad is under the weather. If it's not a prank." Cora's voice trailed off, not wanting to think about the possibility of what she saw on the call being real. Because if it was real, then it meant her sister was dead. Finally, she shook her head violently, as if she was forcing the idea out of her mind. "What do I need? What do I need?" she muttered to herself. An idea struck her suddenly, and she snapped her fingers in realization. Coffee. Stumbling towards the kitchen, Cora clutched onto the counter for support, guiding herself towards the coffee maker with unsteady steps. She fumbled with the machine, hastily inserting the strongest coffee pod she could find and pressing the start button. "Oh shit, I need a cup," she muttered, her movements frenzied as she scrambled to grab any cup she could find. With the coffee maker humming to life, Cora rifled through a cabinet, snatching up the first cup she laid her hands on and positioning it beneath the spout just as the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee began to fill the air. "I'm going to need more than one of those," she noted, eyeing the meager contents of her single cup. Glancing down at her clothes, Cora grimaced at the realization that her fuzzy pajamas and slippers were hardly suitable for a late-night venture. "And going to need a new outfit," she muttered. With painstaking effort, Cora made her way to her bedroom, the simple task of getting dressed taking longer than usual as she grappled with the fog of alcohol lingering in her mind. Eventually, she emerged clad in jeans and a sweatshirt, ready to face the unknown outside. Returning to the kitchen, Cora seized the coffee cup and downed its contents in one gulp, the scalding liquid searing her throat and eliciting a pained cough. Standing amidst the quiet of her apartment, she surveyed her surroundings with a heavy sigh, a hand pressed against her throbbing temple. "Yep, one more." As the second cup of coffee brewed, Cora rummaged through a drawer, retrieving a retractable metal baton. Though not exactly legal for personal carry in New York City, her dad had insisted she and Jenny keep one for their safety during the late-night walks home from work. Pocketing the baton, Cora turned her attention back to her coffee just as it finished brewing. Before gulping it down, she grabbed a handful of ice cubes and tossed them in, waiting for them to melt slightly to cool the scalding liquid. "Well, Cora, you're not sober yet, but you're at least somewhat thinking," she quipped to herself, a smirk playing on her lips as she downed the cup, wincing at the residual heat despite the addition of ice. Taking a moment to steady herself, Cora nodded resolutely and made her way towards the door, her grip tight on both the knob and her makeshift weapon. With a deep breath, she swung the door open, relieved to find the hallway deserted. Stepping out, she flinched as the door slammed shut behind her, but quickly regained her composure and began walking down the hallway. The double dose of concentrated coffee worked its magic, helping to clear her mind and sober her up as she approached the end of the corridor. Just then, the elevator chimed, signaling its arrival. Cora tightened her grip on the baton, poised to extend it if necessary, as she watched the doors slide open. Her tension melted away when she saw her neighbor, Summer, stepping out of the elevator. "Oh, thank God, Summer," Cora exclaimed. Cora rushed towards Summer, her heart pounding with desperation, almost enveloping her in a hug. But Summer, weary from a double shift and not in the mood for affection, reacted with irritation. "Jesus, Cora, I know you've been drinking. But could you stop with the lovey-dovey shit?" she snapped, her tone sharp with fatigue. "I just worked a double, and all I want to do is pound a few and pass out." Backing away, Cora attempted to speak, but her words came out as a jumbled mess of cries. The sight of a friendly face had shattered her defenses, allowing her pent-up emotions to pour out. "Summer, please, we have to get out of here. Jenny, she's dead, and there are people, crazy people, there." Cora's voice trailed off into panicked ramblings, her eyes wide with fear. Summer, bewildered by Cora's distress, softened her demeanor, placing a comforting hand on Cora's shoulder. "Cora, I'm going to need you to take a breath, girl. I'm sure Jenny's fine. You know how she likes to play pranks on you," Summer said, trying to reassure her. But Cora's response was a cry of anguish. "She's dead, Summer. I saw it with my own eyes. We have to get to my parents' house." Summer shook her head, reluctant to entertain Cora's fears. "Girl, it's the middle of the night, and I have to be back for the lunch shift," she protested. Though Cora's hysteria began to ebb, she remained on edge. "Please, Summer, we have to go to my parents," she pleaded, her grip on Summer's arm tight. Seeing the distress etched on Cora's face, Summer relented. "Okay, Cora, I'm going to help you get a cab. But that's it," she conceded. Cora's face lit up with gratitude as she pulled Summer towards the elevator. "Okay, I guess we're going right now." They descended in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them as they reached the lobby, which was eerily deserted. Stepping outside, Summer made a beeline for the curb, scanning the street for any sign of a cab, but found none. "Of course, there's never one around when you need one," she muttered in frustration. Meanwhile, Cora cautiously ventured onto the sidewalk, her senses on high alert. As she approached Summer, she caught sight of a figure at the corner, about 20 yards away. Her grip tightened on her closed baton as she watched the figure, who seemed to be scanning their surroundings frantically. Suddenly, their eyes locked, and the figure let out a haunting moan before sprinting in their direction. Cora's instincts kicked in, and she swiftly opened the baton, prompting a startled reaction from Summer. "Jesus, girl, put that away. You know those things are illegal, right?" Summer exclaimed, but Cora remained silent, her focus solely on the approaching threat. As the creature drew nearer, Summer turned to face it, attempting to defuse the situation with a casual remark. "Hey, buddy, slow down. The sidewalk isn't a racetrack," she called out, but the creature paid no heed, its relentless advance sending a chill down their spines. Realizing something was amiss, Summer's tone shifted, her voice laced with apprehension. "Let's get back inside." Before they could retreat, the creature closed the distance, stepping into the glow of a nearby streetlight. In the dim illumination, they both saw the horrific truth. The figure was a police officer, his uniform stained with blood, chunks of flesh missing from his arms and neck. What the hell? Chapter 2. Summer's scream pierced the night air as the bloody, zombified officer charged towards them. In a split-second reaction, Cora unleashed a primal scream of her own and swung her baton with all her might, connecting with the creature's arm. The impact was jarring, the sound of bones snapping audible amidst the collection of screams and moans. Though the blow failed to deter the advance of the creature, it succeeded in knocking it off balance. With a stumble, the ghoul careened towards Summer, crashing headlong into a nearby trash can. Frozen in terror, Summer and Cora watched as the creature thrashed about on the ground, its movements frenzied and disjointed. As it attempted to rise, the bone in its broken arm snapped once more, piercing the skin and sending it crashing back down. What do we do? What do we do? Summer's panicked voice echoed Cora's own fears. Cora stepped up, swinging the baton forcefully onto the back of the zombified officer, hitting it several times, continually knocking it back to the ground. Despite the constant bashes, the zombie never let out a cry of pain, only the desperate moans. As Cora continued her assault, a man's voice suddenly rang out from the entrance of their apartment building. "Hey, what are you doing to that officer, you punk?" The voice demanded, its tone accusatory and aggressive. Summer turned around, paralyzed with fear, as the large man rushed over to Cora. With a swift motion, he seized Cora's wrist, forcibly pulling her away from the officer as she lifted her arm for another blow. Cora stumbled backward, the force of the yank causing her to lose her grip on the baton, which clattered to the ground. Hastily, she moved to retrieve it. The man turned towards the two women, his voice dripping with scorn. "You know, it's punks like you that are turning this city into a nightmare," he chided. "Get away from him. He's dangerous," Summer interjected, her voice trembling with fear. But the man's rage only intensified, his finger jabbing accusingly towards Summer. "You shut the hell up. I'm going to deal with you in a second," he spat. As the man turned away, the zombified officer began to rise to its feet. In that brief moment, the man realized the grave mistake he had made. Before he could react, the ghoul lunged at him with terrifying speed. The impact sent them both crashing to the ground, the force knocking the wind out of the man as he hit the pavement. Desperately, he tried to raise his hands in a defensive gesture, but it was too late. The creature sank its teeth into his hands, eliciting a breathless scream of agony from the man as he watched two of his fingers disappear into the creature's gaping maw. He could only stare in disbelief as the creature chewed on his severed digits. Cora and Summer stood frozen in shock, their minds struggling to comprehend the horrifying scene unfolding before them. The man's frantic thrashing only served to further agitate the ghoulish officer, whose relentless pursuit of its prey intensified. With a gut-wrenching moan, the creature dropped the chewed-up fingers before lunging for the man's throat. Both women recoiled in terror, their screams stifled by their hands pressed firmly over their mouths, lest they draw the attention of the ravenous ghoul. As Summer turned to flee back into the safety of the building, Cora's firm grip on her arm halted her in her tracks. In a daze, Summer followed Cora as they sprinted down the street, the urgency of their escape overriding any semblance of coherent thought. Half a block away, Summer finally snapped out of her shock, wrenching her arm free from Cora's grasp. "We have to get inside," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with fear. "No, we have to get to my parents' house," Cora insisted. "I know you're worried about them, but clearly something bad is happening, and we need to be inside," Summer argued. "I know something bad's happening. What that officer did to our neighbor, Cora's voice caught, emotions threatening to overwhelm her, but she managed to choke back the tears. "I saw someone do that to my sister." Summer nodded thoughtfully as Cora laid out her plan. The gravity of their situation hung heavy in the air, but they both knew they needed to act fast to ensure their safety. "My parents have a boat. If we can get there, we can get away from people," Cora explained, gesturing towards the gruesome scene behind them. Summer took a moment to process this information before nodding in agreement. Where do your parents live? A few miles to the south in Baldwin Harbor, Cora replied. Summer glanced back at the violent attack still unfolding outside their building before decisively stating, "Okay, let's go." Together, they rushed towards the next intersection, their pace quickening as they ran alongside the building, eager to put distance between themselves and the zombified officer. Meanwhile, Summer pulled out her phone and began dialing, prompting Cora's curiosity. "Who are you calling?" Cora asked. "Going to try and get us a taxi." "Maybe they're still operational," Summer replied. As they continued walking, they kept their heads on a swivel, wanting to make sure they weren't surprised by any undead assailants. It's ringing, Summer announced eagerly. However, their hopes were dashed as the phone continued to ring unanswered. "Nobody's answering. They always answer." "The bars are closing, and this is their busiest time," Summer lamented. "Maybe there's nobody there," Cora said. "But where in the hell would they go?" Summer said. "Taxi drivers are on the front lines. If something is going wrong in the city, they'd be among the first to know about it. If you were a dispatcher and knew what we know, would you stay at your job?" Cora reasoned. After a brief moment of contemplation, Summer hung up the phone and motioned for them to continue walking. However, their progress was interrupted by the ominous sound of approaching moans. "Quick, the alley," Summer said. As Summer and Cora took refuge in the narrow alleyway, their hearts pounded with adrenaline-fueled anticipation. Peering cautiously from behind their concealment, they watched as the zombified officer sprinted down the street, his undead vigor both astonishing and horrifying. Their astonishment only grew when they saw the angry neighbor hot on the ghoul's heels. "What the hell? Is that the same guy who got his throat ripped out?" Summer exclaimed, her disbelief evident in her voice. Cora looked closely, and despite the distance she could see he was missing a couple of fingers. "Look at his hand," Cora urged, prompting Summer to observe the gruesome wound, a grim confirmation of the man's identity. "We have got to find transportation." "There's no way we're going to be able to make it 3 miles on foot," Summer declared, her voice laced with urgency. "Jenny had the car tonight," Cora revealed. "And I can't afford one," Summer said. "Then what are we going to do?" Cora asked. After a moment of contemplation, Summer let out a defeated sigh. "What is it?" Cora asked. "We need to walk down to the restaurant I work at," Summer said. "You want to go around people?" Cora questioned, her apprehension evident. "Not particularly, but it's going to be closing soon, and the cabbies know that. We might get lucky and catch one of them," Summer said. "Or we might be walking into a human buffet," Cora countered. "I know it's not ideal, but I know a few of the kitchen guys have cars. So even if there isn't a taxi, we might be able to hitch a ride," Summer said. Cora, still feeling the lingering effects of the alcohol, took a moment to steady herself before resigning to their uncertain fate. "I don't know what else we can do. So where are we going?" she asked. "It's 3 blocks down towards the main drag," Summer replied. "That's going to be a lot of people," Cora said. "Relax, we're a full block away," Summer reassured her, her voice calm yet determined. Accepting the plan, Cora nodded, and the two women quickened their pace, putting more distance between themselves and the horrors unfolding behind them. They moved swiftly and silently along the sidewalk, their senses heightened, continuing to scan the streets for threats. As they reached the next intersection, screams pierced the air, drawing their attention up the street. As they turned and looked, they saw the zombified officer and their former neighbor attacking a young couple as they walked down the street. Cora instinctively wanted to help, but Summer grabbed her arm. "We'll just get killed ourselves," Summer said. Cora still felt the urge to go, however it quickly dissipated when they saw 2 more creatures come out from an alleyway to attack the couple. The 2 women put their grief away, using the grisly distraction to move up the next block. They picked up the pace as they heard moaning coming from behind them. While they couldn't see what was making the noise, they knew creatures were on the loose. The duo made it up to the intersection where they could see the restaurant, which was to the west a block on the opposite corner. They poked their heads around the corner of the building, looking in the direction of the eatery, their spirits immediately dropping. Jesus Christ, Cora breathed. The scene was horrific. A handful of zombies were attacking patrons on the patio, feasting on the fallen as others tried to put up a fight. A couple of drunken men used chairs as weapons, swinging it wildly into a trio of ghouls. While the tactic may have been effective against humans not wanting to get hurt, the creatures just rushed straight into the thick of the fight, the chairs bouncing off their bodies as they slammed into the men. Their screams filled the air as the ghouls ripped into them. Meanwhile, a waitress ran out the front door, limping as she held the wound on her thigh. She managed to get a few steps outside before two creatures came running after her. The women could only watch helplessly as she was tackled in the middle of the street, her screams echoing off the buildings as the creatures ripped into her. Cora turned to Summer, her eyes filled with desperation. "Summer, what are we going to do?" she asked. "I don't know, Cora. I just don't know." Chapter 3. The two women stood at the side of the building, their gazes fixed towards the restaurant, which was descending into chaos. The patio lay nearly deserted, with only a handful of creatures feasting on the dwindling number of remaining survivors. One final holdout was pressed against the door leading back into the restaurant, wielding a steak knife in a desperate attempt to fend off the advancing ghouls. With a piercing scream, he thrust the knife towards the head of one of the creatures, managing to pierce its skull just as it tore into his flesh. Cora and Summer watched in stunned silence as the creature collapsed, lifeless. "At least we know we can kill them," Summer remarked. "We're going to need a lot more knives," Cora replied, "because there's got to be a dozen of those things over there." They redirected their attention to the waitress laying in the middle of the road, flanked by the two creatures that had followed her out. Suddenly, the creatures caught wind of something down the street and bolted off, leaving the waitress behind. Within moments, she too reanimated, sprinting after them towards the major thoroughfare just a block away. Despite the late hour, a handful of cars sped down the street, unhindered by any stoplights to slow them down. As the two women let out a sigh and began to move south towards Baldwin Harbor, Summer abruptly grabbed Cora's arm, pulling her back behind the cover of the building. Cora's heart raced with fear initially, her weapon raised and ready for trouble. However, when she realized Summer was only looking back towards the restaurant, her tension eased. "What is it?" Cora asked. "Look at the wall surrounding the patio," Summer replied. Cora cautiously peered out, her eyes scanning the scene of carnage on the patio, but she couldn't figure out what had caught Summer's attention. "I have no idea what I'm looking at," Cora admitted. "The bikes, girl, the bikes," Summer clarified. Cora glanced again, this time spotting a couple of bikes leaning against the brick wall of the patio. She ducked back behind cover, disbelief etched on her features. "You can't be serious," she said. "I'm very serious," Summer affirmed. "If we don't find any transportation, we're not making it to your parents' house." "But there's got to be another way," Cora insisted. "I'm open to suggestions," Summer replied. Cora hesitated, weighing her options before shaking her head. "What if they're locked up?" "They're not," Summer stated confidently. "How in the hell do you know that?" Cora questioned. "Because they belong to." Summer trailed off momentarily, her thoughts drifting to the death and destruction on the patio, causing her to change her tense. "They belong to a couple of my regulars. This is a pretty decent neighborhood, and they always sat outside by them, so they never bothered to lock them up." Cora pondered Summer's words for a moment before shaking her head in disbelief. "This is crazy." "Trust me, girl, I know. But the other options are either to walk 3 miles or to fight our way into the kitchen and hope one of the guys with a car is still alive," Summer said. Cora thought it over as she looked at the scene again. While it was still dangerous with the front door of the restaurant open, the patio was largely enclosed, with a small gate on the far side being the only entry point that wasn't from inside the restaurant. "Okay, how do you want to do it?" Cora asked. "I think if we cross the street and get past the front door, we should be able to stay low along the wall," Summer responded. Cora took a deep breath, letting out a sigh before she spoke. "You know, it's probably a good thing I drank so much tonight." Why do you say that? Because if I was 100% sober, there was zero chance I'd be doing this, Cora admitted with a wry smile. Summer couldn't suppress a half smile before she lightly smacked Cora on the arm. Just make sure that your weapon's ready. Come on. Cora nodded in agreement and followed Summer out from their cover. They dashed across the street, pressing themselves against the row of stores that led straight up to the corner restaurant. As they neared the front door of the restaurant, the sounds of carnage emanated from within. Moans filled the air, accompanied by the clatter of tables and dishes being overturned, punctuated by occasional screams of pain. Cora thought for a moment for the poor souls still alive inside, but she knew she couldn't do anything for them. Summer looked back at her, motioning for her to follow closely. Summer ducked down, hoping to use the chest-high wall of the patio for cover. There were still half a dozen creatures inside the walls, however most of them were trying to get through the door to the interior of the restaurant. Still, Summer knew if one looked their way, it was going to be a bad time. Leading Cora away from the door, they cautiously moved over to the edge of the street, keeping a wary eye on the creatures inside. A quick glance into the restaurant revealed a scene of utter devastation, with no survivors in sight. A ghoul feasted upon a fallen victim in the entrance, gnawing at their flesh with frenzy. Darting across the opening, they reached the street side of the patio wall, pressing their backs against it in an effort to remain hidden. However, their movements hadn't gone unnoticed. A zombie inside the patio turned its head, drawn to the slight noise that they had made. They froze as they heard the creature running towards the wall, slamming into a table, sending some of the plates crashing over the wall and onto the women. Cora managed to hold the plate against her, preventing it from crashing to the ground and attracting more creatures. For agonizing moments, they remained motionless, listening intently as the creature retreated back towards the restaurant, its steps fading into the cacophony of others attempting to breach the building. Summer and Cora released the breath they hadn't realized they were holding, relief flooding through them as they resumed their cautious progress along the wall, inching closer to the bikes, which now lay a mere 10 yards away. With each step, tension coiled tight within them, their ears attuned to the faint sounds of the zombies prowling just beyond the barrier. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the bikes, their goal tantalizingly within reach. Before they can make their move for them, however, they hear footsteps and moaning coming from behind them as the victim in the entryway reanimated and ran out to the street. The ghoul looked around, drawn to the noise the patio creatures were making, spotting the two women in the process. "Get to the bike," Summer yelled. Summer and Cora jumped up, grabbing the two bikes on the wall and immediately hopping onto them. As they did, the creature behind them began sprinting, gaining ground as they pumped their legs hard on the pedals. They went straight across the intersection towards the main thoroughfare, not wanting to slow down their momentum by making the turn. As they glanced back, they saw that several of the zombies had run out through the opening on the side of the patio wall. "Where are we going?" Cora yelled. Summer pondered their options, her gaze darting over the buildings lining the street and the approaching expanse of the major road. Though the traffic was sparse, the sight of passing cars stirred a sense of unease within her. Yet the sight of the advancing ghouls galvanized her decision. "Go straight through the intersection," Summer commanded. Cora's incredulous response came swift and sharp. "Are you out of your mind?" "Just do it," Summer yelled. Cora glanced back, seeing that the closest zombie was within 5 yards of her and sprinting as hard as it could. She knew that if she slowed down for the road that she'd be caught. "Damn it." Cora's scream pierced the air, a raw expression of fear as she matched Summer's pace, their legs pumping hard on the pedals as they neared the intersection. In a heart-stopping moment, a car roared past them, the rush of wind threatening to throw them off balance, but they pressed on. With 4 lanes stretching before them, 2 in each direction, the women braced themselves as cars streamed by from both sides. They darted into the first lane, the blare of a horn from a vehicle approaching on their left in the second lane echoing around them. Undeterred, they forged ahead, the cacophony of honking intensifying as they crossed. The shriek of tires followed, terrifying them. Then a collective sigh of relief escaped them as they reached into the second lane. Beside them, the driver behind the honking horn veered sharply into the first lane, the impact sending a jolt through the air as the vehicle collided with several of the pursuing creatures. Two bodies hurtled through the air, crashing onto the unforgiving pavement with a sickening thud, the sound reverberating through the night air. The third figure, however, met a more grisly fate, hurtling through the windshield with explosive force, shattering glass and showering the driver in a hail of shards. Cora and Summer could hear the harrowing aftermath unfolding behind them, the symphony of destruction driving them to pedal harder. As they approached the last two lanes, a deep horn blared, a warning that sent a shiver down their spines. Glancing to their right, they watched in horror as a tractor-trailer barreled towards them, its brakes screeching in a desperate attempt to stop. The truck careened into the adjacent car, triggering a chain reaction. Metal shrieked and twisted as the truck jackknifed and the car veered uncontrollably. Within moments, it slammed into the first wrecked vehicle, trapping a zombie between the twisted metal carcasses. Cora and Summer pressed on, their eyes fixed on the other side of the road, just ahead of the impending disaster. They cleared the intersection mere moments before the truck reached them, the rush of air from its passage whipping at their backs. They stopped half a block up, looking back at the pileup. Cora was shaking, not just because she survived, but racked with guilt for what they just did. "We have to help them," she murmured. "We have to keep moving." Summer yelled in response. Cora couldn't tear her gaze away from the carnage unfolding behind them, her heart heavy with the weight of the destruction they'd left in their wake. The sound of more crashes and the blaring of horns only served to deepen her sense of dread until Summer approached her, shaking the handlebar to snap her out of her trance. "Look, Cora, I hate what just happened. I really do. But it's done," Summer said. "And if we didn't do what we just did, then we'd be dead. If we live through the night, it's going to haunt me. But I'm going to need to live through the night for that to happen, so I'm going to need you to snap the fuck out of it and tell me where we're going." Cora took a moment to steady herself before nodding. "We need to hang a left a few blocks up and start heading south. Once we get closer to Baldwin Harbor, I can start figuring out exactly where we're going." "Okay, Cora, that sounds good," Summer replied, offering a comforting tap on Cora's shoulder, a silent gesture of support that Cora gratefully accepted. With resolve renewed, they mounted their bikes and resumed their journey, pedaling steadily through the quiet streets until they reached the turn towards the south, relieved to find no sign of the pursuing creatures in sight. They rode in silence for the better part of a mile before stopping to catch their breath, Cora taking a moment to orient herself. "Do you need me to punch in the address to my phone's GPS?" Summer offered. Cora shook her head. "It's okay, I know where I am." "How much further?" Summer inquired. "About another mile and a half until we get to the front gate," Cora replied. "Front gate? Are your parents loaded or something?" Summer asked. "I mean, they live right on the water with a boat," Cora explained. "And you lived in that crappy apartment building with your sister?" Summer asked. "Don't get me wrong, I love my parents, but they could be a bit on the overbearing side from time to time. Having freedom from that was worth the living conditions," Cora replied with a wry smile. "If they live in a gated community, then please feel free to let your parents know that they can adopt me anytime they want." "I'm happy to follow their rules," Summer joked. Cora chuckled before growing serious again, pulling out her phone. "We don't have time for calls, girl," Summer said. "I know, I just want to try my mother again. Let her know we're coming," Cora explained. She dialed her mother's number, but after several moments passed, she shook her head and pocketed the phone. "Come on, let's get moving. It should be pretty quiet for a while, because it's mostly residential through here," Cora said, and Summer nodded in agreement as they continued biking towards Cora's parents' house. Chapter 4. Cora and Summer navigated their bikes through the deserted residential streets, their senses on high alert, scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. Though occasional movements caught their attention down some streets, they didn't slow down long enough to determine if it was a zombie or just a passerby. Approaching the next intersection, Cora raised her hand to signal Summer to stop. They pulled up next to the street sign, both breathing heavily from the exertion of their journey. "We have to be getting close, right?" Summer panted. "It's about another quarter mile up," Cora replied. Then what are we waiting for? Summer asked. We have to ride by a supermarket, Cora explained. Summer sighed, shaking her head at the news. Can we not go around it? We can, but we'd have to go through a bar and restaurant district. Unless you want to ride another mile to detour around it, Cora countered. After a brief moment of consideration, Summer shook her head. How far away from the grocery store is the front gate? 3, maybe 4 blocks, Cora answered. Okay, we go for it then. How do we get inside? Summer pressed. There's a security guard. I've known him for years, so he'll let us in, Cora said. Assuming he's still there, Summer said. Cora's brow furrowed as she considered this possibility. After a moment of contemplation, she spoke up. If he's not, then it's a simple button press in his little shack and we're in. Okay, let's do this before I change my mind, Summer said. The two women resumed pedaling, their pace quickening as they approached the supermarket, which loomed ominously a block away on their left. The distant sounds of moans and banging echoed from the store, sending a shiver down their spines. With caution in their movements, both of them increased their speed before ceasing to pedal altogether, not wanting the slightest noise from their bike chains to attract any unwanted attention. As the store came into view, their hearts leaped into their throats. There were easily a couple dozen creatures at the front of the store, all of them banging on the glass, trying to break in. The lights were still on inside the store, and the girls could see some movement inside, like the people inside were trying to fortify the doors. Exchanging a worried glance, Cora and Summer redirected their focus to the road ahead. Navigating around the store's parking lot, they pedaled just enough to maintain their momentum, their nerves on edge as they passed by without drawing attention. Reaching the other side of the parking lot, they allowed themselves a momentary pause, looking back towards the store with bated breath, praying they had gone unnoticed. After several tense moments, they breathed a collective sigh of relief as the ghouls remained fixated on their futile attempts to breach the store's defenses. Where the hell did all those things come from? Summer asked. Cora looked at her watch, seeing that it was well after 2 in the morning. The bars are only a few blocks away. One person making a run for it could have drawn the whole crowd here, she said. Taking one last cautious glance behind them to ensure they weren't being followed, the two continued down the street. After riding for a couple of blocks, they spotted the front gate to the community in the distance. Pausing momentarily, they surveyed the area, seeking any signs of danger. While no zombies lurked in sight, the absence of a security guard left them unsettled. Approaching cautiously, they stopped 10 yards from the gate and dismounted their bikes. Cora, taking the lead, pulled out her baton, keeping it poised for defense. I don't see the guard, Summer said. Cora advanced, walking to the side of the front gate shed before angling herself to peer inside. As she neared, she froze abruptly, her senses on high alert. What is it? Cora wordlessly pointed towards the unsettling sight, prompting Summer to step forward and inspect the gruesome scene for herself. A pool of blood marred the ground, accompanied by half-chewed chunks of flesh. They scanned their surroundings, searching for any sign of the culprit or the victim, but found nothing. Come on, we have to get inside, Cora urged. Cora inched her way towards the shack, summoning the courage to step inside and hit the button. The gore on the ground repulsed her, but finally she leaned inside and hit the button. A moment later, the metal gate began to creak open, the high-pitched squeaking sound setting both women on edge. Hastily gathering their bikes, they hurried through the opening, stopping just a few yards inside as the gate continued to swing wide. How do we close it? Summer asked. It's automatic and on a timer, Cora replied. In the distance, the moaning and heavy footsteps from the grocery store drew their attention. They looked down the street, their hearts sinking as they witnessed a half-dozen or so creatures rushing towards the sound of the gate, which still emitted an ominous squeak. What do we do? Cora asked. Summer stared at the mob rushing their way, seeing that they were running so fast that they were most likely going to make it to the gate before it closed. We have to get away from the gate and hide, she declared. Cora nodded in agreement, and without hesitation, they sprinted back through the gate, abandoning their bikes where they lay. Racing towards the nearest house on the corner, they shoved open the gate and darted into the backyard. As they slammed the gate shut behind them, they hunkered down behind it, peering out just enough to keep an eye on the metal gate of the community. "Come on, close, you bastard. Close," Summer muttered. Summer's repeated mantra filled the tense air as they watched the front gate slowly begin to close, its squealing protest echoing through the night. But just before it sealed shut, the 6 creatures racing towards it slipped through the narrowing gap. One of them, attracted by the movement, flailed at the gate and became trapped as it closed, its arm wedged between the 2 sides. As the squeaking ceased, the other 5 creatures lost interest and wandered off into the neighborhood, leaving the trapped ghoul to struggle fruitlessly to break free. Summer and Cora huddled down, watching as a couple of zombies ran past on the street. Despite the darkness and their cover, they remained cautious, unwilling to risk being spotted. "Damn it. That could have gone smoother," Summer muttered. "Could have gone a lot worse, too," Cora replied, attempting to find a silver lining in the situation. "Okay, so where's your parents' house?" Summer asked. "2 streets down. Then 3 more to the waterfront," Cora answered. "Okay, let's get moving then," Summer urged. Before they could start, however, an exterior light flicked on, revealing a man holding a handgun as he stepped onto the back porch, his voice booming in the stillness of the night. "What in the hell are you doing in my backyard? You trying to rob me?" the man demanded. Both women raised their hands, fear coursing through them. "We're just leaving," Summer said. "The hell you are. I'm calling security," the man retorted. "The security guy's dead," Cora interjected, her voice trembling. The man's response was harsh, his voice rising in anger as he shouted, prompting both women to motion for him to keep it down. "You really need to keep your voice down," Summer cautioned. "It's my house, I'll do whatever I goddamn please. Now I said shut the hell up," the man bellowed. As the loud thud reverberated through the fence, the man reacted angrily. "What in the hell was that? You have friends out there?" He motioned for the women to move back with a wave of his handgun. They did as instructed, keeping their hands held high. "You don't want to open that door," Summer warned. "Just shut up already," the man snapped, his agitation evident as he approached the gate. Summer and Cora looked at each other, nodding as they silently agreed on a plan. As soon as the man turned his back to them, they took off running towards the back portion of the yard. They didn't look back when they heard him yelling obscenities at them. A moment later, they heard a different kind of yelling from him, this yell born of pain. They got to the back of the fence, which was head high, with no footholds to boost them over. "Jump up there, and I'll push you over," Summer yelled. Cora wasted no time, doing exactly as instructed. She leaped up, gripping the top of the fence tightly with both hands while anchoring her feet for stability. Feeling Summer's hands on her rear, she braced herself as her friend pushed with all her strength. It took a moment of concerted effort, but Cora managed to hoist herself up and straddle the fence's top, casting a glance back towards the gate they had entered through. Horror washed over her as she witnessed 2 zombies feeding on the homeowner, his wife's horrified scream echoing in the night air. As the woman attempted to shut the patio door, one of the creatures turned its attention towards her, lunging forward in a frenzied sprint. Despite her efforts to close the door, she was too slow, and the ghoul surged through. "I'm going to need help getting over," Summer called out. "I'm ready," Cora said. Summer took a few steps back, gathering momentum before launching herself upwards. She seized the top of the fence, her fingers gripping tightly as Cora grasped her arm and began to pull her over. Midway through their struggle, Cora glanced back and saw another creature emerging through the gate, its eyes locking onto them before breaking into a sprint. "One's coming, we gotta go," Cora yelled. Both of them let out grunts as they pushed and pulled. Finally, Summer managed to swing her leg over the fence, both of them tumbling over to the other side just before the zombie slammed into the fence. They hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from their lungs. After a moment to recover, they gingerly rose to their feet. "Are you okay?" Cora asked. Summer nodded, still gasping for air. "Yeah, but that was a little too close for my liking." "Same here," Cora agreed. Are all your neighbors that friendly? Summer quipped. Let's hope not. Come on, Cora replied. Navigating through yards devoid of fences, they kept their distance from the houses as they made their way towards the road. As they reached the street, they paused, scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. Finding the area quiet, they were about to move when a car alarm blared to life a block behind them. That should hold their attention. Come on, let's get to your parents, Summer suggested. Cora nodded in agreement, and the two women continued their journey towards Cora's parents' house, sticking to the grass to minimize their noise level as they ran. Chapter 5. Cora and Summer hurried across the grass, finally arriving at Cora's parents' house. They paused just outside the front walkway, their attention momentarily drawn back towards the front of the community, where the sound of a blaring car alarm and honking horns echoed in the distance. If people are trying to get out of the neighborhood, we don't have much time, Summer remarked, her voice urgent with the sense of impending danger. It's okay, my parents have a private dock, Cora said. Approaching the house, Cora took the lead, stepping up to the front door with a keypad lock. With practiced ease, she punched in a 6-digit code, and the door unlocked. That's fancy, Summer said. Just wait until you see the rest of the house, Cora teased, giving Summer a wink before they stepped inside and shut the door behind them. Summer stepped into the front room, which was gigantic. There was a large television on the wall, with oversized recliners facing it, and some high-end artwork on the other walls. This room is twice the size of my apartment, she observed, awestruck by the opulence. Yeah, my friends loved sleeping over when I was younger, Cora said. Where's your parents' bedroom? Summer asked. Upstairs, Cora replied, gesturing towards the staircase. Do you want me to go with you? Summer offered. No, I'll take care of it, Cora said, pointing towards the back of the house. The kitchen is right through there. I want you to pack up every bit of food and water that you can. There should be some reusable bags in the pantry. I'll be packed up when you get down here, Summer said. Cora nodded and headed upstairs as Summer went into the kitchen. While she knew she had a job to do, she couldn't help but be distracted by view out of the back windows. Wow. Now that's a sight, she murmured. Summer walked over to the window, looking out at the bay, which was reflecting the moonlight in a spectacular manner. With all the horror that she had witnessed tonight, she was thankful to see something beautiful. Come on, Summer. There will be plenty of time to stare at the water when you're out on it, she chided herself, tearing her gaze away and heading towards the kitchen area. Summer turned and walked into the kitchen area towards the pantry, but froze when she saw a significant amount of blood on the kitchen counter. A drawer was open, and there were several towels strewn about. Summer froze, looking around for anything to defend herself with. Finally, she spotted a large wooden butcher's block, reaching in and pulling out a long knife. She gripped it in her hand tightly as she looked to the ground, spotting the blood trail leading off down a hallway. Step by cautious step, she edged closer to a door at the end of the hallway, the moaning growing louder with each passing moment. Despite her apprehension, she pressed on. She finally got to the door, putting her ear against it and hearing the moaning. She initially reached for the doorknob, but stopped, lightly knocking on the side of her head. Knock first, you dumbass, she thought to herself. Summer shook her head at her own stupidity before knocking on the door lightly. Hello? Are you okay in there? She said. Before Summer could knock again, the moaning inside the room intensified, and with a sudden burst of force, the creature inside slammed against the door. Startled, Summer stumbled back, her heart pounding as she raised the knife defensively, ready to strike at any moment. To her relief, the door held against the impact. Frozen in shock for several moments, Summer eventually snapped out of her daze, her mind racing with panicked thoughts. Oh my God, Cora, she muttered. With adrenaline coursing through her veins, Summer sprinted back towards the front of the house, racing up the stairs in search of her friend. Spotting Cora at the far end of the walkway, Summer called out urgently as Cora opened a door. Shut the door. Shut the door. Summer yelled out. Startled by Summer's frantic cries, Cora turned around just in time to see her friend sprinting towards her. Shut the door. Summer repeated. The words registered in Cora's mind, and she lunged for the doorknob, intending to pull it shut. But before she could act, it was too late. Her father, now transformed into a zombie, burst through the door with surprising speed, catching them off guard. Cora let out a scream as her zombified father tackled her, pinning her to the ground and lurching towards her throat with gnashing teeth. In a split-second reaction, Summer darted forward, grabbing the back of the undead man's shirt and pulling him back with all her strength, narrowly preventing him from sinking his teeth into Cora's flesh. "Dad, what are you doing?" Cora cried out. Cora pushed against her father's chest while Summer pulled on the back of his t-shirt, desperately trying to keep him away from Cora. They could see the blood around his mouth and on his shirt, which told a clear story that neither wanted to hear. "Get him off of me," Cora pleaded. Summer's eyes darted to the side, where she spotted the wooden railing. With a determined huff, she ducked down and thrust her shoulder into the undead man's armpit, using all her strength to lift him upwards. With a powerful heave, she managed to send the ghoul over the railing, and they heard a sickening thud as it hit the marble floor below. Cora was left shaken but unharmed, tears streaming down her face as she tried to process what had just happened. "My God, girl, are you okay?" Summer asked, her voice filled with concern as she helped Cora to her feet. Cora stood there in shock, her mind reeling from the traumatic encounter. "What happened to him?" "They were inside," she exclaimed. "I don't know, Cora, but we have to go," Summer said. Before Cora could respond, they heard moaning coming from below, directly beneath them. Peering over the railing, they saw Cora's zombified father struggling to rise, his back clearly broken from the fall. They watched in stunned silence, feeling helpless and overwhelmed by the horrifying scene unfolding before them. "Cora, do you still have a room here?" Summer asked. Cora remained silent, lost in her own turmoil, until Summer shook her gently, snapping her out of it. "Cora, do you still have a room here?" "Yeah, I do." "It's at the end of the hall," Cora finally replied, her voice hollow with grief. "Okay, I want you to go pack up as much clothes as you can, and some blankets and pillows. It's cold out on the water," Summer instructed. Cora nodded silently before walking off towards her room. Left alone, Summer made her way down the stairs to where the zombified father lay, gripping her knife tightly in her hand. "I'm sorry, sir, I really am. But I can't leave you like this," she murmured softly to thrashing, undead creature. Summer lifted the knife high before driving it into the side of his head. The creature fell limp to the ground, finally at peace. Summer stood there for a moment, ensuring that it wouldn't move again, before draping a blanket over the body. "Come on, Summer, get that food packed up," she reminded herself, finally mustering the strength to move into the kitchen. Over the next 10 minutes, both she and Cora packed up everything they could salvage. As Cora entered the kitchen, she found Summer standing by the window, gazing out at the moonlit water, with several bags at her feet. "I have enough clean clothes for a couple of weeks. I grabbed some of my sister's stuff for you. I think you're about the same size," Cora said. "Thank you, Cora," Summer replied gratefully. Before Cora could respond, they heard the familiar sounds of banging and moaning echoing down the hallway. Cora jumped at first, but then the reality of who was making the noise sank in, weighing heavily on her. I don't know what happened to them, Summer," Cora confessed. Summer approached her, offering a comforting arm around her shoulder. "I don't know what's happening either, Cora. But once we're out on the boat, we'll start figuring it out, okay?" Summer said. Cora nodded, shouldering the bags of clothes while Summer took the heavy load of food. Struggling under the weight, Summer accepted Cora's help with a couple of bags to ease the strain. Together, they made their way out of the back door and onto the dock, Cora pointing towards a sizable boat nearby. "It's the big one up there on the left," Cora directed. The boat was large, easily 20 feet long with a decent-sized area underneath the deck. Summer thought about asking how much something like that went for, but she knew it was most likely more than she would make in a decade. Tossing the bags onto the deck, they were suddenly startled by screams emanating from further up the dock. Turning towards the disturbance, they witnessed a couple fending off creatures as they desperately tried to reach their own boat. Get on board, get on board, Summer urged. We have to untie the rope, Cora exclaimed, eyes wide with alarm. I'll get it, Summer responded, springing into action. Climbing onto the boat, Cora positioned herself as Summer dashed to the front. Fumbling with the mooring rope, Summer quickly worked to free the boat from the dock. With a swift motion, she released the knot, allowing the vessel to drift away from the dock. As Summer pushed the front end away from the dock, the sound of approaching footsteps reached her ears. Glancing back, she spotted two creatures sprinting towards her, closing the gap rapidly. With no time to spare, she made a split-second decision. Summer looked at them, seeing that they were taking up the majority of the dock, so there was no chance of breaking through them. So she did the only thing she could do, which was jump out towards the boat. With a desperate leap, she nearly grasped the railing before slipping and plunging into the frigid depths below. The shock of the icy water enveloped her, stealing her breath and numbing her senses. Amidst her frantic struggle, she heard two distinct splashes nearby, signaling the unwelcome presence of the pursuing creatures. Panic surged within her as she thrashed her arms and kicked her legs, desperate to put distance between herself and the undead pursuers. Emerging gasping for air, she found herself within arm's reach of the floundering creatures, their frenzied movements threatening to drag her back into the watery abyss. Summoning every ounce of strength and resolve, she propelled herself away from them towards the safety of the boat. As she reached the vessel's side, she watched with relief as the creatures sank below the surface, disappearing into the murky depths. Get to the back of the boat. There's a ladder, Cora yelled. Summer nodded and slowly worked her way around the outer edge of the boat as Cora started up the engine, pushing them a little further away from the dock to make sure Summer didn't have any more unexpected visitors. Finally reaching the ladder at the stern, Summer climbed aboard to be met by Cora, who handed her a silver emergency thermal blanket. Get below deck where it's warm. I'll come down when we're safe, Cora instructed. Summer nodded and moved towards the stairs, shivering the entire way. Meanwhile, Cora returned to the controls, hitting the throttle and carrying them out from the dock area. As she went, she looked over to where the couple had been fighting the creatures, seeing them pinned to the deck of their boats by their attackers. Shaking her head, Cora steered the vessel out into the open water, a sense of relief washing over her as they left the docks behind. An hour passed, finding Cora and Summer seated on the boat's upper deck, both now dry and warmly clothed. A thick blanket draped over their shoulders as they sipped steaming cups of coffee. In the distance, the silhouette of land loomed, its nocturnal appearance scarcely different from any other night. I'm really sorry about your family, Cora, Summer spoke softly. Cora merely nodded, taking a sip of her coffee before responding. Thank you, Summer. If you need to talk. Summer trailed off. I'm sure I will, and I appreciate the offer. But I really don't want to talk about it right now, Cora replied, her tone subdued. Summer nodded understandingly, offering a gentle pat on Cora's leg as they lapsed into silence once more. Minutes passed in quiet contemplation until they spotted another boat approaching, still some distance away. They can see us, right? I don't want to go through all this and end up drowning in a boating accident, Summer voiced her concern. Yeah, I have the outer lights on, Cora assured her. Tense moments ensued until the approaching boat illuminated a set of flashing blue lights. Never thought I'd be relieved to see the police, Summer remarked with a smirk. We don't know if it's the police, Cora cautioned. Summer tensed, acknowledging Cora's valid point. It was entirely plausible that the approaching vessel could harbor someone fleeing the anarchy on shore, grabbing the first available means of escape. Standing side by side on the deck, they awaited the arrival of the other boat, which soon pulled up alongside theirs. Stepping out from the controls, a young officer emerged, his appearance disheveled, his uniform marred with bloodstains. Are you all right over there? He inquired. Yeah, we're all right, officer. Are you okay? Cora returned the question. The officer paused, pondering for a moment before responding, honestly, I don't know. Well, do you know anything? Like what in the holy hell is going on? Summer said. The young officer appeared overwhelmed by a surge of emotions, shaking his head before speaking. Whatever it is, it's bad. Really, really bad. Momentarily lost in thought, the officer refocused as Cora addressed him. So what are we supposed to do? After a brief moment of contemplation, he shook his head, admitting, I honestly have no idea. All I know is I'm going to float out here until someone tells me it's safe to go back on land. Cora and Summer exchanged a solemn glance, silently concurring. Then that's what we're going to do too, Cora affirmed. So drop anchor and join the party, officer, Summer added with a touch of wry humor. Grateful for the solidarity, the young man nodded appreciatively as he returned to the controls, releasing the anchor with a press of a button. Stepping back onto the deck, he observed the two women peering back towards the shore. In the distance, from various directions, several other boats emerged, all converging towards their location. Looks like we're not the only ones with that idea, Cora remarked, her voice containing a mix of uncertainty and relief. The three of them watched as the other boaters made their way towards their position. Nobody knew what was happening, or what to do next, only that for the moment they were safe. The end.